Hello, Cornerstone Church. My name is Don Brushaber, and I am a member of our congregation. For those of you who don't know me well, I have a job that allows me to work from home. In fact, I've worked from home every day since about a week before the official UK lockdown began. And during that time, I've had lots of conversations with multiple coworkers about some of the struggles that we face, when we work from home. And so I decided to do some research and give a presentation at work on how we can work from home in a more healthy way. And the information was so well received that my company is now recording the presentation and distributing it to our entire global organization. And while I'm happy that people from my organization can benefit from some of this practical advice, I really hope that the church can also benefit. Paul tells us in Galatians 6:10, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. So it's my hope, my prayer, that the following presentation will help those of us who are working from home to do so in a more healthy way. The most important message I can share with all of you today in terms of working from home on a regular basis is this: everyone struggles. Everyone struggles. Those of you who have been working from home for a while now can probably tick off a number of benefits to working from home on a regular basis. So maybe you get a bit of a lie-in every morning. Maybe you don't have to pay commuting costs or petrol costs, and you can avoid crowds that you might otherwise encounter around the office. But there are a number of difficulties that we experience when we work from home. Some of those struggles are common across most of us. For example, most of you who have been working from home for 6 or 8 or 10 weeks now have almost certainly found yourself for long stretches of time sat in a single place, sedentary, staring at a screen, hardly blinking. But there are individual difficulties that we face. So some of you might have small kids at home that just have to be managed during the working day. Some of you, like me, might have a dog that bursts into the room and barks at really inopportune times. Others of you might have roommates or housemates that are inconsiderate while you're trying to work. And of course, we all have our own individual unique personalities and characteristics that we bring to bear on the situation. But the key point is, whatever our mix of struggles are, we all struggle. There's a poem going around social media that talks about this. It's called "We Are Not All in the Same Boat." And it has an interesting premise. The premise is that we're all in the same storm together, but in different boats. So while your boat might be doing relatively well, perhaps it's battered around by the wind a bit, but largely on course, whereas my boat might be taking on water or might be dashed against the rocks. But the point is, we're all struggling in this work from home environment, and that is normal. And once we understand and accept that it's normal, then we can make decisions that will help us to work from home in a more healthy way. How do we do that? Well, there's 3 other points that I want to share with you that hopefully will help you to do that. First of all, I want to make you aware of some of the common impacts to health from working from home. Secondly, I'd like to share with you some ideas on how you can work from home in a more healthy way. And third, I'd like to talk to you briefly about how you might be able to sustain those changes to your behavior once you make them. Let's start off by talking about some of the impacts that are common in people that work from home regularly. The first one that comes across in literature in my studying is loneliness. So we are made to be social creatures and interact and talk and share our experiences and our burdens and socialize. And for many of us, this lockdown period has taken away the vast majority of our face-to-face interactions. And that can lead to loneliness. In fact, there was a recent study done by Forbes that said 19% of people who work remotely experience loneliness. And that was a figure pre-lockdown, when people could still see friends and family members outside of work. I've also heard and read that loneliness can be twice as harmful to our health as obesity. So it is a very serious concern. And while any of us can experience loneliness, and I even during the workday sometimes experience loneliness, even though I have a family at home, this is a particular concern for those of us who live and work from home alone. A second common impact for us from a health perspective from working from home is burnout. And burnout happens when we blur the lines between our work life and our personal life. When we leave a physical office location and pack up at the end of the day, that's called psychological detachment. And that's a signal to our brains and our bodies that our workday has ended and our personal day has begun. But when we work where we live, that psychological detachment is much, much less pronounced. In fact, it's very easy when you work from home to fall into the trap of just sending one more email late in the evening or late at night, just checking in on some messages that have been exchanged because, you're at work after all, right? There was another survey that was done that said 82% of technology workers struggle with burnout because they're doing exactly what I described, blurring the lines between personal life and work life. Another consequence that some people experience from working from home is physical unwellness. So if you're like me, you're often sat in a substandard chair for 8+ hours a day. And perhaps you're sat staring at a screen for long stretches of time, not realizing that you blink less when you look at a screen. And some of you, maybe to be considerate to your housemates, are wearing headphones all day long. Well, those actions can lead to chiropractic, visual, and auditory health concerns that can be quite serious if left unchecked. The final impact I want to share with you is one that you might all have been thinking about all along, and that's stress. There are some unique stress triggers in this environment that come about from working from home. One of them is increased self-management responsibility. So because it's more difficult to communicate with our bosses and our coworkers, we end up taking on more of the burden of managing our workload on ourselves. And for some people, that's very stressful. Secondly, we have information isolation coupled with decreased productivity. So in this modern world, we exchange a lot of information on email and messaging systems, and we have lots of virtual meetings. But there's still a friction in terms of communication quality that exists when you communicate virtually and electronically as opposed to face-to-face. And what that does is it puts pressure on our productivity. Because most of us, when we're working from home, don't have reduced productivity expectations or more generous deadlines. We have to get the same amount of work done, even though it's taking longer to exchange information. And those two factors together create lots of stress for a number of people. We also sometimes feel stress over the inconveniences that we cause for our housemates, our family members, our roommates. And there's, for some people, the stress of always having to be plugged in all the time. Because again, you're essentially at your work location all day long. Your boss knows that you're not out at the pub with your friends, you're not out visiting relatives, you're at home. And so some people feel guilt and feel like they have to be available all the time. So given this set of potential consequences to our health, as well as others that I haven't mentioned, how can we work from home in a more healthy way? Well, I'll give you a couple of big ideas and then some practical advice. So a couple of big ideas. One is to just be honest with yourself and acknowledge when there are health impacts that you're experiencing, and then take the initiative to choose more healthy behaviors. Once you've done that, you can start following and choosing some of these healthy behaviors, like being more social, establishing positive routines, taking regular breaks throughout the day, giving your eyes a rest, and setting healthy boundaries. So practically, what would that look like? Well, some suggestions that I've read, but also adopted for my own personal health, is every day I put time in my diary to get up from my seat, to leave the place where I'm working, to have lunch, interact with my family, go for a walk, do a jog, whatever I feel like. But basically, it's just mental and physical time away from work. I also set up coffees and lunches with friends, with coworkers, with mentors and mentees, just as I would in a physical office. And while it's a little bit different doing that virtually, what's important is that you're taking a break from work and being social and continuing that interaction that you have with people while resting your mind. Another thing that I do is when I'm in a meeting and I don't have to be on camera and I don't have to be staring at a screen, I try to look away from the screen to give my eyes a break. And I also try to do some light stretching, even if I exercise, as long as the exercise doesn't prevent me from concentrating on what's happening in the meeting. It's important, of course, to stay hydrated and to eat well during this time. And what I like to do to retain that psychological detachment I mentioned earlier is completely shut down my computer and put it away at the end of the day so I don't have to see it until the next day. Most importantly, though, is this last point, that if you are feeling unwell for whatever reason, talk to somebody about it. It could be somebody from church, like a small group leader or an elder. It could be a family member or a friend or a housemate. But just make sure if you are feeling unwell, definitely talk to somebody about it. Don't bear that burden alone. So keeping those items in mind, some of you might go and set about to adopt some of those behaviors. We've all tried to make changes like this in the past and had the changes kind of fall away after a week or two. So what are some things that we can do to sustain these changes once we decide to make them? Again, a couple of ideas for you here. One, it starts again with acknowledging the impacts that working from home has on your health, and then giving yourself permission to make that change and say, I want to work in a healthier way, and I'm going to. From that point, you can do a couple of different things to help yourself. One is to establish an accountability partner. So you might find somebody, again, it could be somebody from church or a family member or a friend, somebody who's willing to reach out to you on a few times a week or on a daily basis, just to check in and say, how is that change coming along that you were trying to adopt? Are you going fast enough? Are you going too slow? Are you struggling? Is the goal appropriate? And just have a dialogue with you about the change you're trying to make and to hold you accountable. Another thing you can do is to write down the change or changes that you want to make and put the list by your bedside. And when you wake up in the morning, pick up the list and read it so that change is in the back of your mind, influencing your behavior all day long. Similar to doing devotions every morning. One other thing to bear in mind is that you need to understand your capacity for change. So if you're the kind of person that can make 10 changes in your life all at once, that's great. You should do that. If you're the kind of person that can make 1 to 2 changes in your life at a time, that's great. You should do that. But just make sure you're not setting your pace of change out of guilt or setting it according to someone else's schedule. You need to do what works for you. Don't be ashamed or embarrassed by it. Just do what works for you. And finally, don't be afraid to engage your manager on discussions if work can help you to work in a more healthy way. For example, after working from home for about 2 weeks, I started getting cramps and soreness in my hands from typing on a small laptop keyboard for 2 weeks. I had a discussion with my manager and we were able to get me a keyboard and a mouse, a bigger keyboard and a mouse. And that has really helped, and the pain has now gone away from my hands. And I can't promise that every manager or business will be that accommodating, but in my experience and my friends' experiences, most employers do want you to work in a healthy way and will certainly be open to having discussions with you about how work can help you to do that. So I hope this presentation has helped you to acknowledge and be aware of some of the health impacts that might arise from working from home, and has suggested to you a few ways that you could potentially work from home in more healthy ways, and even given you some suggestions on how to sustain those changes over the long term. But again, the most important point from a practical standpoint I can tell you about how to work from home in a more healthy way is to start by acknowledging everyone in this environment struggles. Struggling is normal. And the great thing about our situation as a church is that we have a great built-in support network that we can call up and talk to, we can share our struggles with, and we can pray for each other. So take advantage of that when you're struggling working from home. You just need to talk to somebody. Reach out to somebody at church, especially, who will be there to talk and pray with you.